Welcome back to Storytime with GamGam, and today we're going to have another story in the series Winnie the Pooh's Bedtime Stories, which was by Bruce Talkington, illustrated by John Kurtz, and this one is by Gopher. Gopher's Day Off. Will Gopher be successful in helping Winnie the Pooh to feel tired enough to sleep so he can finally have his breakfast? Let's find out. Gopher's Day Off. It was difficult for Gopher to tell exactly what sort of day it was in the 100-acre wood. Not that he was uninterested, quite the contrary. When a gopher spends all his time underground, changes in the weather are happenings of great interest. But Gopher was a tunneler. As Tigger might say, making pathways underground was what gophers did best. Sunshine or rain, stillness or blistery breezes would simply have to wait until Gopher had completed his latest project. And now, his latest project was almost complete. He had one more passage to dig, and the main hallway connecting all of his underground mazes would be finished. After drawing a large X with his finger on the blank wall of soil before him, Gopher spit on his paws and rubbed them together in anticipation. He grasped his pick fiercely, whistling a brief tune between his teeth, and smiled happily. 1, he counted, getting an even firmer grip on the handle of his extra-large pick. 2, he continued, swinging the heavy pick so high over his head that the weight of it almost pulled him over backwards. 3, by dingy, he shouted, digging the sharp point deep into the wall of the earth. Kerploosh! A stream of water squirted through the hole made by the pick and thoroughly drenched Gopher. But more surprises were yet to come. Before he could pull the pick free, the entire wall of soil collapsed under a rush of water from the river next door. Gopher was swept, swirling down his tunnels before it. Meanwhile, in a field some distance away, Winnie the Pooh and his friend Piglet, Tigger, Rabbit, and Eeyore were seated around a blanket spread on a soft green grass. An array of food that included everyone's favorite snacks was arranged on it. "What I like best about picnics," said Pooh happily, smacking his lips, "is the picnic." "Me too," agreed Tigger as he picked up a rather large sandwich, "although the food's pretty nice too. Hoo hoo hoo!" "It's too bad Gopher couldn't join us," remarked Piglet as he carefully tied a napkin around his very small neck. "He told me he had too much excavating to do," droned Eeyore sadly. "If anyone's interested in what anyone told me, that is." "Humph," said Rabbit. "Not even I can work all the time. He should be thinking about vacations instead of excavations, if you ask me." "Oh," said Pooh, pulling a sticky face out of an almost empty honey jar. "I think he's too busy digging to think about either of those things." Before anyone could explain to Pooh that digging and excavating were very much the same thing, the ground beneath the picnic emitted a low rumble. "Excuse me," said Pooh, thinking it was his tummy saying how much it was enjoying the picnic too. But then the ground gave a vigorous tremble. Suddenly, at the other end of the clearing, a geyser of water spurted out of the entrance out of one of Gopher's tunnels. "My goodness!" exclaimed Pooh as the water splashed over them. "It seems to be raining upside down." The next thing anyone knew, Gopher came popping out of the tunnel atop the geyser, flew high into the air, and landed with a crash right in the middle of the picnic. As the water ceased to spurt and Gopher tried to disentangle himself from assorted fruits, vegetables, and thistles, picked just the way Eeyore liked them, his friends were at a loss as to exactly what to say. Finally, Pooh decided it was always beneficial to be polite when one wasn't precisely sure what was going on around one, which Pooh, for one, certainly wasn't precisely. That is why, of course, Pooh was the most polite inhabitant of the 100-acre wood. "Welcome, Gopher," Pooh began with a warm smile. "We're glad that you could come to, Pooh watched for a moment as Gopher sat dejectedly in the middle of the blanket, full of goodies, then continued, on our picnic. Well, whistled the indignant Gopher, you can bet I'm not going to miss any more outings. You mean you finished your tunnels? Asked Rabbit. No, sir, snapped Gopher. I mean I'm finished with my tunnels. All that work, and what have I got to show for it? Holes full of mud and a tail full of potato salad. Gopher stepped off the blanket and sat down next to his friends with a determined thump. But what'll you do if you're not going to tunnel? Tigger wanted to know. Aren't tunnels what gophers do best? I hope not, said Gopher with a sigh. I didn't do very well with these. I think I'll just help you all for a while. Maybe we'll find something else I can do. And Gopher was as good as his word. Pooh was the first to experience his helping paw. It seemed there was a very large hollow tree full of a very large amount of honey collected by a swarm of very large bees. Pooh had tried and tried to climb the tree, but it was much too smooth and slippery, and the honey was located, as Pooh put it, very up off the ground. Gopher happened along and discovered Pooh rocking back and forth on his heels and looking up longingly at the tree. Can't reach it, eh, Pooh? Asked Gopher, taking in the situation at a glance. I can reach it all right, said Pooh, but only with my eyes. My arms aren't nearly long enough. I can fix that in no time, whistled Gopher professionally. He set to work, digging furiously around near the base of the tree as Pooh watched in growing wonder. It seemed that hardly any time had passed at all before Gopher had opened up a large tunnel leading down under the hollow tree. How's that, Pooh Bear? Asked Gopher as he brushed the dirt off his paws. Well, said Pooh, looking so far down into the deep hole that his voice echoed, it certainly seems very nice, but what is it exactly? It's a passage so that you can get into the tree from underneath, exclaimed Gopher proudly, and lets you crawl inside and get to the honey. Yes, said Pooh in a very loud humming sound, echoing back up out of the hole, but doesn't it also let the bees get out to us? Oops, yelled Gopher. He and Pooh turned and ran away as fast as their legs would carry them as the bees swarmed out of the excavation and, with an angry buzz, gave chase. The next day, Gopher wandered into Rabbit's garden as Rabbit was planting celery seeds for the following summer's harvest. Say now, said Gopher as he watched Rabbit placing the seeds into small holes he had dug, then covering them gently with earth. Need any help? Why, yes, Gopher, I do, answered Rabbit, delighted to have a volunteer. Could you plant the rest of these seeds while I go untangle my tomato plants? Absolutely, Gopher assured him as he took the spade out of Rabbit's paws, glad to be of assistance. Rabbit went off to tend his tomatoes as Gopher happily dug into the rich, dark earth. When Rabbit returned a short while later, he found a very large hole in the middle of the celery patch, with Gopher at the bottom of it singing to himself. Gopher! Rabbit called down to the hole. Is that you? Course it's me. Gopher's voice drifted hollowy from the immense hole. Is this deep enough for your seeds, Rabbit? Rabbit's ears drooped, and he gave a weary sigh. Yes, Gopher, I believe it's quite deep enough. Thank you. Later that same afternoon, when dark clouds were gathering in the sky above the 100-acre wood, Gopher discovered Eeyore trying to repair the roof on his home of sticks. "Lo, Eeyore," Gopher greeted the donkey. "What's up?" "Not my roof, that's for sure," Eeyore answered sadly around the sticks he was holding in his mouth. "I was hoping I'd finished before it started to rain." "Never mind the roof, Eeyore," advised Gopher. "What you need is a basement." "Really?" asked Eeyore, his droopy ears perking up in surprise. "Well, I'm not one to argue, so how do I go about getting one?" "Just leave it to me," Gopher assured him, and set to work. Before Eeyore knew it, Gopher had dug a huge basement under the little house of twigs and sticks. Unfortunately, it was so huge that after some creaking and some leaning up this way and that, the house finally gave up and collapsed into the hole with a loud crash. Eeyore surveyed the pile of sticks scattered on the bottom of the large hole. "Well," he rumbled, trying to look on the bright side of things, "it certainly is a nice basement for storing sticks." I'm sorry, Eeyore, said Gopher sadly. I haven't seemed to be much good for anything lately. Eeyore tried to think of something hopeful to tell Gopher, but the despondent rodent wandered off into the woods as the first drops of rain began to fall. Eeyore decided it was a perfect time to pay a visit to Piglet, who happened to have the best roof in the forest. Eeyore wasn't the only one familiar with Piglet's snug roof and well-stocked larder. When the donkey arrived in the middle of the pouring rain, thundering thunder, and lightning's lightning, he found Tigger, Rabbit, and Pooh there before him. As the friends sat around Piglet's cozy kitchen table, the conversation turned to Gopher. He's just not fitting in anymore, said Rabbit. That's because he's not doing what gophers do best, Tigger pointed out. He should be digging tunnels, not anything else. But how can we convince him of that? Asked Piglet. What do you think, Pooh? I think, said Pooh, who hadn't been listening to the conversation at all, but instead of looking out of Piglet's window at the downpour, that our river seemed to be quite too full of itself. The others gathered at the window to see what Pooh was referring to. They saw that the stream that usually flowed peacefully past their homes was so full of rainwater that it was on the verge of overflowing its banks. Oh my goodness, screeched Rabbit in horror. It's going to flood our houses. The friends ran to the front door and threw it open. Standing on the doorstep, drenched and dripping, was Gopher. Good, he said when he saw the surprised faces of all of his friends. Now I can apologize to you all at once. No time for that now, Gopher, squeaked Piglet anxiously. It appears we're all about to be washed away. And there's not a thing we can do about it, moaned Rabbit, looking at the surging water hopelessly. Oh, yeah? Snapped Gopher. Just watch this. Gopher hurried to a nearby tunnel entrance and quickly dropped out of his friend's view, waddling through the mud and debris still visible from the earlier flooding. He made his way to a tunnel wall that bordered on the river. He could hear the water roaring by on the other side. Locating a discarded pick, Gopher gripped it tightly and said to himself through teeth gritted in determination, now to do what I do best. He stabbed deep into the wall with a spade, and the water immediately gave way as the river water poured in and once again swept Gopher swirling away through his tunnels. Later, when the storm had passed and the sun was peeking through what remained of the dark clouds, Gopher found himself sitting once again in the midst of a muddy field. He had landed there after being ejected from one of his tunnels by a familiar geyser of water. Before he could pick himself up, however, he found himself surrounded by his friends, who immediately began slapping him on his muddy back and shaking his dirt-encrusted paws, spattering droplets of mud all over themselves and not minding it at all. You did it, Gopher, said Pooh excitedly. You saved our homes from a wedding. All that extra water flowed into your tunnels instead of flooding our helpless homes, exclaimed Rabbit with a tear in his eye. Thank you, Gopher. You're a hero, shouted Tigger, bouncing around the soggy clearing and covering everyone with even more mud. Don't be silly, Tigger, whistled Gopher modestly. I was only tunneling. I forgot how important my work was. Never should have stopped. I'm sorry your tunnels were flooded again, Gopher, said Piglet in a sympathetic way. Thanks, Piglet, but I'll have them all in tip-top shape in no time, said Gopher happily. After all, tunnels are what I do best, you know. No, Gopher, said Pooh, putting his arm around the shoulder of his very dirty friend. What you do best is help your friends out of trouble. Gopher beamed up at Pooh. I like the sound of that, Pooh Bear. I really do. You don't look very tired to me, said Gopher to the smiling Pooh when the story was over. No, agreed Pooh. The story didn't make me tired, just happy. Well, said Gopher, then I suppose you should visit someone who makes you feel droopy, whether he's telling you a story or not. Yes, Pooh replied. I suppose I should. I don't know why you'd want to hear a story from me, grumbled Eeyore. Please, Eeyore, pleaded Pooh. It's very important. It has to do with breakfast and not having any. All right, Pooh Bear, said Eeyore somberly. But remember, you asked for it. So our next story will be from Eeyore. So let's see if he can droll on and lull Pooh into sleep. Thank you so much for joining me for another story of Winnie the Pooh's Bedtime Stories. You have a great day. Bye-bye.